Welcome back, young scholars. In this video, we'll be discussing World War I, which is really the major turning point event between period 5 and the period 6, so between 1914 and 1918. So the big questions you should be able to answer after watching this video are: what were the immediate and main causes of World War I? World War I has a number of nicknames. It's called the Great War, it's called the War to End All Wars, it's called World War I. However, World War I was not called World War I until after World War II. At the time, World War I was known as the Great War because of its global scope. It really starts the decline of European global dominance. So we saw in period 5, the empires in Europe were rapidly expanding and gaining an increasing share of global dominance as a result of European industrialization, scientific advancements, and technological advancements. But this is really the beginning of a period of self-destruction by Europe, with the period of World War I and then into the 1940s and World War II. World War I itself led to 30 million dead or wounded, and so these rivalries that had existed for a long time in Europe start to come to the forefront and boil over. So what were the causes of the war? Well, there's really an immediate cause, and then there's some deeply rooted, more systemic causes. So let's focus first on the most immediate cause of the war. So here's a quote: "Everyone's nerves are tense. It only requires a spark to set the whole thing off." And so it's important to try and figure out what is that spark that is going to set the whole thing off. There are certain events in world history that are almost too incredible to believe. And the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand is one of those events. So first of all, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. Austria-Hungarian was an empire in Eastern Europe that had incorporated Austria, Hungary, and a region called Bosnia, of which the city of Sarajevo, which is where Archduke Franz Ferdinand was that day. This story is almost too incredible to believe because of the amount of incompetence on both the side of the Archduke's security team and also the assassins who were involved. So first, on the side of the security team, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, despite a number of other assassination attempts in the city of Sarajevo, was riding in an open-topped car. They had published the route that Archduke Franz Ferdinand was supposed to travel on earlier that week. So in terms of the assassins were part of this Serbian nationalist group called the Black Hand. And one of the things that they were interested in was trying to encourage a revolution among the Bosnians in order to get them to break off because they were more ethnically similar in their mind to the Serbians. All right, so you had a number of assassins who were stationed along the route. As Franz Ferdinand was passing along, the first assassin just didn't do anything. He was too scared. The second assassin tossed a bomb at Archduke Franz Ferdinand's car, but didn't realize there was a 10-second timer, and therefore it didn't actually do any damage to the car. The other assassins, there were 4 or 5 of them who were stationed along the route, simply watched the Archduke Franz Ferdinand's car, then passed by them. The assassin who had released the grenade took some cyanide, jumped into a river, didn't die because the cyanide was old and not very strong, and the river that he jumped in to drown himself in was only 3 inches deep. So eventually, Franz Ferdinand's car makes its way to the location that he was supposed to go that day. Now, there were some bystanders who were injured, and so Archduke Franz Ferdinand had the plan to go and visit them in the local hospital. So they drove back along the exact same route and the assassination attempt took place. The driver took a wrong turn and ended up at a place called Schiller's Delicatessen, where an assassin just happened to be eating a sandwich that day. Just finished a sandwich, the most famous sandwich in world history. The driver realizes he makes a wrong turn, his gears get jammed, and he needs to turn the car around. And it so happens to be, again, that the assassin is just sitting there and comes face to face with Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophie. He shoots Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife, kills both of them and the unborn child that Sophie was carrying at the time. And this is the spark that begins World War I. So a Serbian nationalist group called the Black Hand assassinates Archduke Franz Ferdinand in the city of Sarajevo, which was part of Bosnia. You can see a picture of the event. The assassin's name was Gavrilo Princip. Here he is being arrested. Now here's a map showing Austria-Hungary, all of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Here you can see again Serbia, the next door neighbor, which was the location of the nationalist group who were plotting this assassination. So Austria-Hungary is broken up into, again, 3 regions. You have Austria, Hungary, and then Bosnia here. And the assassination took place in Bosnia. Again, it was the Serbians who believed that the Bosnians were more similar to them, and so they wanted Bosnia to become part of Serbia. So that was the Black Hand's goal, was to get Bosnia to become part of Serbia. So this is the event, again, that is this immediate spark that sets off World War I. However, there are more longer-term systemic causes of World War I. First, militarism. Militarism is the glorifying of military power and value throughout society. So each nation believed that their power was largely tied to and based upon their ability to wage war. And therefore, militaries were, placed on a pedestal within their society. There were oftentimes these large military parades. Soldiers would wear their uniform everywhere, and soldiers were really elevated within the social status within society. This increase in militarism is also going to lead to an arms race. So it resulted in an arms race between Western European nations. This arms race was to build up various weapons of war. For example, there was this increased naval competition between the British and the Germans to build dreadnought battleships. So these battleships that carried large artillery guns that fired 12-inch artillery shells. So that's one of the examples of this arms race that developed between these rival European powers at the time. Each nation also was developing mobilization and war plans in the event of an attack. The most famous of these was the German Schlieffen Plan, which involved Germany attacking France, but not along the boundary between Germany and France. That would be too obvious and the French would be ready for it. But instead, by attacking through Belgium, which sits on the boundary between Germany and France. So the plan was to attack through Belgium, and that would provide a sneak attack and allow the Germans to make their way ultimately to Paris. Nations are also using conscription, which is mandatory military service, oftentimes through a draft, to establish and build up these huge, massive armies. The second long-term cause of World War I was a system of alliances that had developed. In the years before World War I, a complex series of alliances formed, dividing Europe into 2 main sides. First, there was the Triple Alliance, which was an alliance between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. It's this group that would form the Central Powers, although Italy will not join the Central Powers in the war. But Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire will later form the core group of the Central Powers. And then there's the Triple Entente, which is a French word, and that's how you can remember the French were a part of it. And that included Britain, France, and Russia. So the Triple Entente will later become the Allied powers, which would include Britain, France, Russia, eventually in 1917, the United States. These alliances formed as a result of reciprocal agreements between these countries to provide defense in the case they were attacked. So an alliance system maintained this fragile balance of power in Europe because everyone was fearful that if they started war against another country, that ultimately they then would be attacked. It's kind of similar to later on we'll talk about in the Cold War with mutually assured destruction. Everyone's always fearful to throw the first punch. Once the first punch is thrown, then you got people piling on pretty quickly, which is exactly what happened. If you recall, the first punch in this case was the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand by Serbian nationalists in Austria-Hungary. So the Serbs assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. So in response, Austria-Hungary then attacks Serbia. Well, Serbia is in an alliance with Russia. So once Austria-Hungary attacks Serbia, then Russia jumps into the war, bound by their treaty with Serbia, and decides to come to Serbia's aid. Once Russia attacks Austria-Hungary, well, then Germany, who's in alliance with Austria-Hungary, then declares war on Russia. Then France, who has an alliance with Russia, then declares war on Germany. And so Germany attacks France using the Schlieffen Plan, but not directly across the boundary, but instead through Belgium. Because Belgium is in alliance with Britain, Britain then now is obligated to declare war on Germany. So Britain, allied to France and Belgium, declares war against Germany. Japan, who's in alliance with Britain, also declares war on Germany. Austria-Hungary then declares war on Japan for declaring war on Germany. And then other nations will join sides, some of which will remain neutral. The Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria join Central Powers. Italy, although was initially in an alliance with Austria-Hungary and Germany, later joined sides with the Allied powers. And so here we can see a map of all of the various alliances and then those countries trying to stay neutral, like good old Switzerland here in the middle. So the third major cause was imperialism. So rivalries are forming across Europe as these industrializing Western European powers are competing for colonies in Africa. Again, remember, the scramble for Africa takes place in the late 1800s, and very quickly European nations are able to imperialize and colonize almost all of Africa. And in that process, that leads to a lot of competition and a lot of hard feelings. Also, competition over colonies in Southeast Asia, spheres of influence in China, and we can see that in images like this, where various powers are competing, like Russia, the Russian bear, like the American eagle here, like the Germans, the British, the Italians, the Japanese, all fighting over the remains of the carcass that was China. Germany in the early 1870s unifies, and it rapidly industrializes. I mean, it really quickly industrializes and becomes a major military force and imperial power. But it's a latecomer to imperialism, and so oftentimes a lot of the regions that had been colonized, like in Africa, Germany was unable to make claims to that territory, and as a result, Germany is a little bit bitter about this, and there's statements by like the Kaiser or the leader of Germany saying we need and deserve our place in the sun. Right? We're a powerful, strong German nation, and we should have some colonies. The final long-term cause of World War I was nationalism. So nationalism is that intense form of patriotism that celebrates one's own national identity. And in the process of elevating one's own national identity, that oftentimes has the opposite effect of putting down others who don't share that same national identity. You've seen this in images like this one, this poster showing the empire needs men. That's the British Empire and their various colonial holdings. And so connected to nationalism was this call for increased soldiers and military to get people to serve on behalf of their country and die on behalf of their country. They have to get people to believe in that cause. But we also see the kind of dark side of nationalism. You end up with images like this, showing what appears to be a German who is killing an angel, right? So you get the nationalism that suggests that other people are barbaric and that are angel killers. So where does nationalism come from? If you're the state, how do you generate a sense of unity, a force of unity among the people? Well, a number of ways. Through things like common songs, national anthems, flags. Here you see an image, and you think it's from Nazi Germany, but in fact that's from the United States. They are saying the Pledge of Allegiance. This is how they used to say the Pledge of Allegiance before Hitler made this, what was originally a Roman salute, uncool. It comes from sources like media, from propaganda, from colonial success, which leads to this belief that you are a strong, powerful empire. Another form of nationalism here in the United States, where the Germans are these barbaric people. They're coming to the boundaries of the United States. They're bringing their culture with them. German culture with their sauerkraut and their Wiener Schnitzel and all of the rest. So nationalism ultimately leads to a lot of overconfidence because each country believes that it is going to win the war quickly. And so there's this heavy recruitment because people think, oh, I'll sign up and I'll be back, in just a couple of months because this war is going to be over because we are strong and proud, Germans, or we're strong and proud Austro-Hungarians, and we're going to be able to very quickly defeat the English and the Japanese and the Dutch and the Serbs. So the big question you should be able to answer after watching this video is, what were the immediate and main causes of World War I? And you may have noticed, if you were paying attention, that the causes of World War I spell out an acronym, MAIN, M-A-I-N. So that's militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. As always, thanks for watching.